Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7.
Today we're diving into a source that isn't just, pondering belief. It presents itself as a direct, unblinking divine assessment of our entire spiritual condition.
That's right. We are plunging into one of the most profound theological texts ever recorded. It's described as a dialogue coming directly from the Eternal Father.
And our mission here is really to dissect that relationship between what it calls infinite, unbounded goodness and, on the other hand, our profound and, persistent human ignorance.
The core contradiction we're looking at is ancient. If divine truth offers this perfectly clear path, a path motivated by infinite love, why do so many people, maybe most people, choose what the text calls the path of darkness?
A path defined by infidelity, by self-love, and really importantly for our conversation today, by a kind of practical atheism.
So today we're going to unpack this central metaphor of Christ as the necessary bridge. We'll define the vices that blind us, starting with a concept called proprio amor sensitivo sensory self-love.
And we're going to have to confront the pretty startling theological reality of eternal judgment described in the text.
But we'll do all of this while keeping one thing in sharp focus. The idea that this infinite love desperately wants every single soul to turn around and, live.
If you, as a listener, have ever really grappled with that gap between maybe believing something intellectually and the cynical, materialistic reality of modern life, this deep dive is going to challenge you.
It's time to get into it. So to even start this conversation, we have to acknowledge the unique authority this material claims for itself.
It's not subtle about it. The source explicitly calls itself divine doctrine.
Spoken by God, the Eternal Father, directly to the intellect of a soul. I mean, that sets an incredibly high bar. We're dealing with information supposedly coming straight from the source of all being.
Exactly. This isn't a philosophical treatise or, the result of some scholarly debate. It's presented as revealed truth.
And its aim isn't just for us to understand it, but for it to change us.
Right. And the text gives a really immediate, intensely practical mission statement for why this information is even being shared in the first place.
Which is that spiritual train reaction you mentioned. It starts with knowing yourself, conoscimento di se, and then it moves outward.
Precisely. The argument is that the foundation of all spiritual progress is humility, and that humility is born from knowing your own limits, your poverty, your tendency towards sin.
So only by really knowing the self can the soul start to appreciate the goodness of God.
That's the first step. That knowledge of God's goodness then generates this intense love, or amor.
Okay, so self-knowledge leads to knowledge of God, which leads to love, and then
that love, when it's properly ordered, compels the soul to follow the truth, the verita, which is found in the life and teachings of Christ. It's a necessary progression, a climb.
So if you skip step one, the self-knowledge and humility part,
You short-circuit the whole process. Your pursuit of God becomes flawed from the start. It's rooted in pride or maybe just, sentimentality, but not in reality.
it sounds like an antidote to a lot of modern thinking, which is so focused on self-affirmation rather than real self-knowledge.
It is. You lose the contrast you need to appreciate the divine.
Right.
The source says that true humility and prayer, founded in this dual knowledge of yourself and God, are what unite the soul to the Creator. It's about following the footsteps of Christ crucified.
And that path is not an easy one. It's defined by sacrificial love, which I guess mirrors the act of creation itself.
It does. Let's look at that foundation.
Yeah.
Creation. The text doesn't describe it as like a cold or necessary act. It calls it an overflow, an act of sweetness of love, dolcezza d'amore.
That emphasis on love from the very beginning, what does that tell us about how we were designed?
It establishes our inherent dignity. We were created not just by God, but in God's image and likeness. We actually participate in the structure of the divine Trinity.
And that's not just an abstract idea. The text says it's functionally embedded in our souls.
Yes. The soul participates in the power of the Father through its memory, the wisdom of the Son through its intellect, its ability to reason, and the clemency or love of the Holy Spirit through its will, our capacity to choose and desire.
So we were designed fundamentally to understand, remember, and love the infinite source we came from. Our souls are basically oriented toward the infinite.
They are. Which brings us to the original catastrophic flaw.
Right. If the design was so perfect, what broke the mechanism so badly that we now need this, elaborate instruction manual to get back on track?
The source is absolutely unequivocal on this point. The entire mass of human generation was corrupted by the disobedience of Adam.
And this wasn't just a minor problem, it was a deep systemic wound.
It completely inverted the natural order. Now the flesh fights against the spirit. It clouds the intellect. It weakens the will. Innocence was lost, and it was replaced by a state of rebellion against that original loving design.
This is where that sort of mathematical problem of sin comes in. Why couldn't humanity just, I don't know, do enough good works to fix it?
Because the offense was against an infinite goodness. So Adam, a finite being, committed an infinite offense because of who he offended. Finite humanity could never, ever provide enough satisfaction for infinite justice.
It's like trying to pay off a literally boundless debt. No amount of finite currency can ever settle it.
Exactly. So that required a radical and, frankly, just astonishing divine intervention.
God was sort of trapped between these two infinite poles, his justice demanding a penalty, but his mercy demanding that his creation be healed.
And the incarnation was the solution to that theological impasse. It's the perfect union of the infinite with the finite.
Yeah.
God, who cannot suffer or die, united his infinite nature, the Word, with our lowly human nature.
He was clothed in this same nature, which allowed him to suffer and die.
Yes, and the source uses this striking medical analogy. Christ is the great physician.
The human patient was too sick to even take the medicine.
So the physician, Christ, drank the bitter medicine himself. He sustained the full penalty on his human body, all the way to the shameful death on the cross.
And because that act was performed by an infinite person, it satisfied divine justice infinitely.
While at the same time, it completely appeased divine mercy. It provided sufficient satisfaction for all of humanity, healing what the text calls the mortal pus of Adam's sin.
So it's a transaction rooted in love, but it's still governed by absolute justice.
It's the ultimate expression of providence. The punishment was paid. A path back to our original destiny was paved. But it's a path that every single soul still has to actively, consciously choose.
And that path is the bridge. The incarnation provides the central metaphor for this entire text. Christ as the bridge to heaven.
It had to be a bridge because the original straight road between God and humanity was, well, broken, collapsed by that original sin.
So the Son serves as this indispensable connector. Fully God and fully man, he spans the whole distance.
And the text gets really specific about the construction of this bridge. It's not just an idea, it's built of living stones.
Living stones being the virtues that Christ practiced.
Yes. So the bridge is the way, the truth, and the life. But to walk on it, you have to adopt the very virtues that it's made of.
And the journey across is structured into 3 progressive steps, which correspond to parts of the body.
It's a beautiful piece of spiritual psychology. The ascent starts with the feet,
The lowest part.
the lowest, most foundational state. The soul begins its journey with shame and contemplation of its sins. The feet are on the ground where the dirt is. It's that moment of conversion driven by humble self-knowledge.
And once the feet are on the virtues, the soul starts to move up.
It moves to the heart. This is the critical shift from just fearing punishment to actually embracing the love of virtue.
So the second step is loving God and loving your neighbor. The focus shifts from yourself to others.
Exactly. It's driven by the fire of charity. And then finally, the highest state is represented by the mouth.
The mouth.
The mouth symbolizes manifesting that perfection through your speech and your actions. The soul is high enough now to breathe the clear air of the divine. Its speech is truthful, charitable. Its actions are driven by grace.
So you're not just following Christ's example anymore. You're participating in the very substance of the word.
You're drawing from the eternal deity a love so complete that it just intoxicates the soul and manifests as perfect service to your neighbor.
That is the path of light. It's clear, it's structured, but it's also incredibly demanding. Which brings us to why we're doing this deep dive. The millions who look at that bridge and just say, no thanks.
Or who don't even notice it's there.
What happens to them?
They try the path underneath through the river. And this is where the metaphor gets really stark.
The path under the bridge isn't paved with virtue stones, it's paved with water.
And water, the source says, has no resistance. There's no stability, no place to plant your foot. Anyone who travels on it will inevitably lose their footing and drown. Enegi.
So what does the river symbolize, psychologically?
It's the world of created, temporary things. God is the unmoving rock. But everything else, wealth, pleasure, status, power, it's like water. It flows, it changes, it's fleeting.
So if you set your affection on the flow instead of the rock,
Your own soul just runs and flows like the water. You can't find stability or meaning or peace. It leads straight to spiritual death.
That really defines practical infidelity, doesn't it? Deliberately placing your hope and your energy in the finite world, even though you know deep down it can't last.
And this is where we hit the root cause, the fatal flaw behind all this drowning. The Source identifies it with absolute precision. Proprio amor sentiti divo.
Sensory self-love. Let's unpack that. This isn't just like regular vanity.
No, this is the spiritual poison that blinds the intellect. It's the great inverter of the divine order.
How so?
Our minds are designed to seek the highest good, which is God, the infinite. But self-love warps our judgment. It tricks the intellect into seeking happiness in things that are fundamentally lesser than we are.
We were created as greater than all created matter, so when we try to find fulfillment in possessions or pleasures,
We're seeking satisfaction beneath our own dignity, and that search is doomed to fail.
if you're created for the infinite, any finite satisfaction will always be agonizingly insufficient. It creates this constant hunger.
That continuous, gnawing hunger, that thirst for more that can never be quenched. That's what the Source calls the ardor dell'inferno.
The earnest money or foretaste of hell.
Experienced right here, in this life, it's the immediate consequence of a perverse will. When a soul is denied grace and embraces self-love, it becomes a tree of death.
And the text gives a precise anatomy of that spiritual tree.
It's a fascinating metaphor for vice. The tree of death is rooted in pride, superbia, the assertion of the self over the creator.
And its marrow, its core, is impatience, impaciencia.
That's a surprising choice, isn't it?
It is. Why impatience? Why is that so central?
Because patience is the willingness to accept suffering as part of God's providence, to accept that things take time and that satisfaction isn't always instant. Impatience is the refusal to submit.
It demands immediate gratification.
Yes. In modern terms, impatience fuels perpetual outrage and constant craving. It really is the marrow of the unanchored life.
And the bitter fruit of this tree, the result of pride and impatience, is indiscretion, indiscrezione.
Lack of proper judgment. The indiscreet person either harms themselves through disordered penance, mistaking pain for perfection, or they harm their neighbor by failing to apply ordered charity. These four vices, self-love, pride, impatience, and indiscretion, are what kill the soul.
And this blindness, this self-love, it has to manifest as injustice, right, in two directions.
Yes, toward God and toward your neighbor. The injustice toward God is theft. The soul steals the honor that belongs to God, obedience, adoration, and gives it to its own sensual self-will. It worships its own desires.
And that theft is what blinds the intellect in the first place.
The mind can't see the truth because the will has already decided what it wants, and it's not God.
And the injustice toward the neighbor.
That comes out in three ways: cruelty, avarice, and spiritual neglect. Cruelty is watching yourself and others fall into damnation without any concern. The unjust person actually becomes what the text calls a demon's agent, actively helping to ruin others.
And avarice is the physical side of that cruelty.
Stealing from the poor, hoarding goods, loving the fleeting river more than the eternal rock. It's a complete breakdown of all ordered relationships.
So this whole theological structure gives a very clear explanation for what we'd call practical atheism.
Right. It's not necessarily about someone explicitly saying, I don't believe in God. It's about being in a moral state, the state of darkness of infidelity, tenebrae della infidelità.
A state of ignorance, ignorancia.
And infidelity here is a functional definition. It means you're living without works of charity. Your faith, even if you say you have it, is dead. It lacks the life of grace.
You're blinded by the cloud of disordered love. You just can't recognize spiritual truth because your will is completely pointed at yourself and the sensual world.
And the profound irony, as we were saying, is that the very satisfaction they seek by following self-love, they end up sacrificing. They replace it with continuous suffering.
The ardor dell'inferno.
The suffering comes from that mismatch between our capacity and the object of our desire. The soul is designed to be satisfied only by something greater than itself.
But it clings to things that are lesser.
Creating this insatiable, miserable hunger. I mean, think about the modern world. Continuous anxiety, the pressure of endless comparison on social media, that crushing disappointment when the new car or the promotion doesn't deliver the happiness it promised.
That perverse will clinging to the finite is creating its own torment right now.
It's a powerful diagnosis of modern suffering. It reframes anxiety and dissatisfaction, not just as psychological issues, but as a kind of spiritual starvation.
Which naturally leads to the question of external evil. The trials, the devil. If God is infinitely good, why does he permit such malice in the world?
That's a crucial point. If the devil is malicious and God allows him to act, doesn't that make God somehow complicit?
The source navigates this by really asserting the supremacy of divine providence. The devil and his temptations are permitted by God.
Not out of hatred, but out of love. And for two very different reasons, depending on who is on the receiving end.
Okay, let's start with the faithful.
For the faithful, temptations are allowed in order to prove and increase their virtue.
Virtue can't be perfected in a vacuum.
It has to be tested by its contrary. You can't prove patience if no one ever injures you. You can't prove justice if you're never faced with injustice. The devil becomes an unwitting tool.
So in his malice, he's actually doing God's heavy lifting for the saints.
Exactly, an unwitting asset. But then there's the other half of this function. Demons also serve divine justice directly. They act as God's executioners justiciary in hell.
And this brings us to the unflinching reality of eternal judgment for those who die in that state of infidelity. The source details 4 principal torments for the damned.
We need to go slowly here. This is the most severe application of divine justice in the text.
Agreed. The first torment is the most devastating. It's the privation of the vision of God.
What does that mean for a soul that was created for the infinite?
It's absolute existential loss. The soul, now stripped of the blindness of self-love, realizes with perfect clarity that it was made to know and enjoy God. And it failed.
The pain is so immense, the text says, that if it were possible, the damned would rather choose fire and torture if they could just have that vision of God restored.
It's the agony of ultimate spiritual failure.
And that realization leads directly into the second torment, which is intensely psychological.
This is the worm of conscience. If the first is the pain of loss, this is the continuous, gnawing self-reproach over why the loss happened.
The conscience is no longer blinded. It sees the truth. They were deprived of God and the angels entirely by their own defect, their own perverse free will.
It's the ultimate what if, the endless agony of regret, realizing the truth when it's too late.
The text says the conscience gnaws constantly, screaming, "You chose this! You made yourself worthy of a company of demons."
And third, they get the company they were preparing for their whole lives.
The vision of demons. The source calls this a horrible, terrifying sight. The demons become the permanent environment of the soul. Their darkness, their confusion. It's the soul's eternal dwelling.
And finally, the fourth torment, the one we hear about most often, fire.
Yes, the fire burns them with great pains. But again, the text adds a critical nuance. The pains are varied according to the gravity of their sins.
So it's not arbitrary. It's a manifestation of justice that is perfectly tailored to the soul's own injustice.
Yes, and these 4 torments, privation, conscience, demons, and fire, are the principles. All other torments flow from them.
So this entire framework links the immediate spiritual failure of practical atheism in this life
The ara del inferno.
to its eternal consequence. The soul that lives anchored to the running river is already getting a foretaste of that final separation.
And conversely, the text says the perfect servants of God, through their ordered charity, taste the ara of eternal life, a profound peace and certainty, even while still in this world. The condition now predicts the condition then.
So the ultimate solution to all this darkness is a return to perfect love, or charita. The source stresses this fundamental unity. Love of God and love of neighbor are one and the same thing.
Right. Since we can't benefit God directly, He's infinite, our service, our utility, has to be shown to our neighbor.
It's the practical, unavoidable proof that grace is actually in your soul.
If you claim to love God but you neglect your neighbor, you've failed the test of charity. Simple as that.
Which brings up a crucial question. If God is infinite, how can a finite creature like us possibly serve Him adequately?
God desires to be served by something that's commensurate with His nature, something infinite.
And the only infinite thing we have to offer is our affect and desire, affecto eo desiderio.
Exactly. The finite creature can't offer an infinite object, but it can offer an infinite quality of devotion, a desire that is boundless, continuous, and focused only on God's honor and the neighbor's salvation.
So all the finite works we do, penance, prayer, fasting, even acts of charity, they're important, but they're just tools or strumento.
They're tools for virtue, not the virtue itself. If your desire is rooted in self-love, all those works are dead no matter how intense they are. But if the desire is infinite, those same finite works gain immense merit.
So the internal motive is everything, which leads us to the key regulating virtue, discretion, or discrezione. How does discretion regulate something as boundless as infinite love?
Discretion is the spiritual intelligence that dictates order. It says our love for God must be infinite and boundless. There's no limit on love directed to the eternal truth.
Uh,
But it mandates ordered charity carita ordinata toward our neighbor. And this is where it gets really challenging.
Ordered charity means setting priorities. And the text gives an extreme example that I think would seem really counterintuitive to most people today.
It does. Ordered charity means the salvation of your own soul, keeping it in a state of grace, has to take precedence over everything else.
And the radical example is that one must not commit a single sin, even a small one, to save the whole world from hell.
Wait, that sounds incredibly selfish, doesn't it? I mean, how can theological charity justify prioritizing my own state of grace over the suffering of every other soul?
That is the precise point of theological friction the text insists on.
The source explains that only a soul in a state of perfect grace, motivated by that infinite charity, can actually achieve the greatest good. If you commit a sin, even a small one, you diminish the grace within you. You sacrifice that infinite bond with God.
You sacrifice your capacity for perfect utility for an imperfect work. So the logic is, an imperfect soul cannot perform a perfect saving act.
Precisely. Your primary duty is always to God and maintaining that infinite affect. If you sin, you're serving yourself, not the world. So paradoxically, maintaining that state of ordered charity is the greatest act of selfless love because it keeps your capacity to love infinite and pure.
And this principle is reinforced by the idea that all our virtues are tested and proven in our neighbor through their contraries.
Yes. The soul needs opposition to develop strength. The faithful servant has to demonstrate specific virtues when faced with the opposite action from their neighbor.
Let's run through those tests of faith.
The servant proves patience when their neighbor inflicts injury or slander. They prove humility when they're faced with a proud or arrogant neighbor. Their humility shines brighter against that dark backdrop.
And what about faith? How is that tested?
They prove faith in the face of the infidel who doubts or denies the truth. The infidel's lack of belief doesn't diminish their faith, it actually solidifies it.
So they prove justice against the unjust, mercy against the cruel.
Exactly. The world's darkness becomes the crucible for the soul's light. It dramatically increases their grace, precisely because the temptation to fail is so strong.
We have to talk about the institutional body that channels all this grace. The church, and specifically its ministers.
The Father says that priests, the sacerdoti, are placed in the highest possible dignity. And then there's this staggering assertion. Their dignity is greater than that of the angels.
Greater than the angels. Why?
Because angels can serve and praise God, but they can't administer him. Ministers administer the body and blood of the Son, the sacrament of the altar, which is all God and all man, the very substance of the bridge.
They hold the keys. God calls them my anointed ones or even my Christs.
Yeah, my Christs, plural. And this dignity is tied completely to the function they perform, not their personal holiness.
And that function brings with it the most powerful gift, the Eucharist.
It's the ultimate tool of salvation. It grants life to those who receive it worthily, with grace, but it's also a severe judgment. It grants spiritual death to those who receive unworthily, polluting their soul.
The source then just shifts dramatically. It expresses this profound grief and disgust over corrupt ministers who soil this incredible dignity. The language it's horrifyingly strong.
It is visceral.
Yeah.
The Eternal Father calls them demons incarnate because their hypocrisy is so profoundly opposed to the divine grace they're administering. Their fall is greater than anyone else's because their dignity is higher.
And the text catalogs their specific abominable sins. What are the gravest offenses?
They fall into two categories: abuse of spiritual authority and abuse of the flesh and resources. So, selling the grace of the Holy Spirit, simony, and extreme avarice are paramount. But the source expresses deep disgust over luxury, lust, and specifically that accursed sin against nature, the peccato contra natura.
And the text underscores the severity of that specific offense by bringing up history.
Yes. The Father notes its severity by recalling that he drowned 5 cities for that sin alone. Including that extreme divine response emphasizes that within this theological framework, this sin is an offense of truly shocking magnitude, especially when committed by the priesthood.
And beyond sins of the flesh, their failure as stewards is also a grave corruption.
Their ingratitude is manifold, they're spiritually blind, they don't use the spiritual substance, scripture, doctrine to nourish souls, and they don't use the temporal substance, the alms collected to nourish the poor.
Instead, they spend it on luxurious living, on gambling, on wicked women.
Turning the house of God into a den of thieves. It's the highest dignity facilitating the deepest hypocrisy. A single sin by a consecrated minister is punished more severely because they've received more grace, more light. They drag their flock down with them.
Given this profound description of corruption, what guidance does the source give to the faithful listener? How do you navigate this without losing faith in the whole institution?
This is a critical point of spiritual discretion. The faithful must not diminish their reverence for the sacraments or the authority of the ministers, even if the ministers themselves are wicked.
So you have to separate the treasure from the vessel.
Exactly. Reverence is due to the authority, which is God's, and to the treasure, which is the blood of the Son, not to the person holding the office. A wicked priest still administers a holy sacrament. If you refuse it because of his sin, you're only harming your own soul.
So what should the faithful do when they see this corruption?
They should avoid judging the ministers personally. That's outside their ordered charity. Instead, they should pray, weep, and offer intense desires to God for the reformation and the reformation of the entire church. God will execute judgment. The faithful's duty is infinite love and intercessory prayer.
So now we return to the practical path of light, and it's centered on the one virtue that reverses Adam's original sin: obedience.
Obedience is called the key, the chiev, that Christ left behind. Adam's disobedience closed heaven. Christ's perfect obedience, all the way to the death of the cross, unlocked it again.
The Son's path was obedience, and no one can reach the Father except by following that same path.
So perfect obedience for the human soul means the complete killing of one's own will.
You desire only God's honor and the salvation of souls, and you accept everything, tribulations, consolations, sickness, success, as being permitted by divine providence for your greatest good.
It's the only way to avoid becoming a slave to your own sensuality and the demands of the world.
Let's talk about that providence. If everything is permitted for our greatest good, how does that work in the real world when we see so much suffering and injustice?
The source says God's providence extends to everyone, just and wicked, in a general way. Sun, rain, food, time.
But it also operates in a very specific way in our lives.
Profoundly so. Everything God permits, famine, injury, loss of status, shame, is allowed as a tailored medicine for that creature's salvation.
So losing your job or your reputation isn't just random bad luck. It could be a specific painful intervention designed to draw you back from the path of self-love.
Precisely, a tailored medicine. And the failure of the wicked, the practical atheist, is that they judge these things as cruel or unjust. They completely fail to see the hidden mercy that's intended to pull them back from the flowing river of death.
And what's the greatest sign of a soul that has truly mastered this obedience?
It's the absolute certainty of God's providence. The belief that you will never lack what is necessary for your salvation, no matter what your external circumstances look like. That certainty is the antidote to the anxiety and avarice of the life lived under the bridge.
Finally, we come back to prayer and desire, which you said is the only infinite offering we have. Does our prayer actually change God's mind?
The text is clear. God is not moved by prayer because he needs to be convinced. He's immutable. Rather, he delights in the intense, anguished desire, the desiderio, offered by the soul.
So the act of infinite desire is what constrains the divine to act because it fulfills the purpose for which we were created.
It establishes the ultimate reciprocal relationship. God made the soul with an infinite capacity for love. When the soul uses that capacity to desire God and his honor above all else, God fulfills that desire because it aligns perfectly with his own infinite goodness.
And the final summarizing truth of the whole text just ties everything back together.
Through the disobedience of Adam, we all contracted death, the fall, the corruption of the will. And conversely, through the perfect sacrificial obedience of the Word, the Son, humanity has contracted life. The path back is sealed.
The entire drama of life, of faith, and infidelity, it all just hinges on that one choice. Do you follow the self-will of Adam or the perfect obedience of Christ?
This deep dive has really reframed the whole challenge of atheism. It's not just an intellectual flaw. It's a moral condition rooted in that proprio amor sensitivo and pride.
It shows that the path under the bridge, that river of temporary things, is a path of inevitable self-inflicted suffering.
We've established that the human soul, created for the infinite, can never, ever be satisfied by finite things, not possessions, not pleasures, not even personal spiritual consolations that are devoid of ordered charity.
Only boundless, perfectly ordered love, flowing from that infinite desire, can fill the void.
We've seen that the desire of the soul is the only infinite thing we possess to serve God.
So, if the goal is infinite love and the path is infinite desire, what finite action, what lingering self love, or what temporary possession are you still prioritizing over that boundless sanctified desire? We have seen the consequences of misplaced hope in the river. What must you abandon to make your desire truly infinite?